Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to john911.com. On this video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I have been discussing mounting scopes onto Blaser rifles, and this isn't Blaser specific, but a couple of things were getting lost in translation, and it just made a lot of sense to just make a video of it. So I'm going to be out of frame. Let me see if you can get right there. There I am, see right here. And over on the workbench in the rifle room, and the specific guy that I'm making this video for, he is in the United States, but he's originally from Mongolia, so I'm not even going to try to say his name. I just call him G, the letter G. So if I understand what G is trying to do with his new Blaser rifle, is what a lot of guys want to do with their precision rifles. So you'll see people try to maximize the amount of bore offset, scope bore offset on their rifles. And I have done this, I've obsessed on this in the past, and my opinions on it have changed somewhat. So what I am discussing for the sake of this video is, just to illustrate the point, we have the scope over the barrel, and the difference between the center of the scope and the center of the bullet out of the barrel is your offset. So that obviously is important when you're calculating your holdovers or your drop data, or even shooting in closer ranges. It's more important with, especially like red dots and shooting within 25 yards. You need to, it's like common knowledge. Like, let's say if you have a rifle and you're engaging somebody at short ranges, you don't put the red dot right on the center of their head. If you're making a headshot, you would put it up and at the scalp line, just to illustrate the point. So that would be your offset where your sight versus where your barrel and your bullet is. So on precision rifles, it's not that big of a deal, because once you have everything dialed in and you're going up and down your turrets, the offset, as long as you know what it is. If you're shooting offhand, say up close, if you're at some kind of precision rifle match, and you're shooting out from 100 to whatever yards, and all of a sudden they throw in a really short range target at you just to screw you up, it's good to know what these offsets are to be able to adjust for them. However, what can happen is what they try to do, if I can show it here on this one, let me get we'll do it just like that. So if you'll look at this barrel and scope, I believe that's a USO scope. So what we have is, this is the base. This is the scope base for mounting the scope. And you'll notice that the objective, let's see if I can illustrate this on video, this objective here, the outside of the objective, is below the front of the scope base. So if you are just mounting an optic and you're not trying to clear the scope base, this is a lot easier. And what G was asking me was, he wanted to know what height rings I have on this rifle to get this uber really close. If you can get, let's see if I can get it on video here. The clearance between the front of that scope base, that rail, and the taper in the bell, it's pretty close. You could get maybe $2 bills through there. And that's, obviously I had to work hard to do that. And he wants to know what the magic number is to get all that to work, so he could just go and buy the rings and he'll be set. And unfortunately, it's not gonna happen. So G, what you need to realize is, not only do you have to be aware of, say, 50 millimeter objectives, or what's this one? This one is, I think this one's possibly bigger, the USO, or let's say 50, 55, or 60, or whatever it's going to be. Or this Schmidt and Bender is let's see, 3 to 12 by, or let's see, 3 to 12 by 50 millimeter objective. What the difference is, this is a 50 millimeter and this is a 56 millimeter. But what burns you on this, and when you're trying to get down below your scope, below your base, is the angle or the degree of pitch here in your objective. So you'll notice on this Schmidt and Bender, it's a steeper angle than it is even on this Steiner. And so what I had happen to me, in particular, it was on an old FN SPR 83G, an old FN, basically a Winchester Model 70 gun. And I think G is seeing this on his current gun, is you will see people, if they're trying to get their scope as low as they can, and if the base extends out farther than they need it, a lot of people will cut it off or trim it. So he has noticed on his used rifle that somebody has trimmed the front of the scope base on his gun, and he thinks that's a bad thing. Well, I had to do that very thing on an old FN gun. So right now, G is probably asking, well, you know, what's the number of what's the height of the rings, or what's the numbers? Give me some numbers. And unfortunately, the problem you have, like, let's see, I got a pair here just to use as an example. These are, I think these are old Seekins rings. If you were to put these in metric, they come out to 7.24 millimeters, and in imperial, they're 0.285 inches tall. So the problem is, when you're dealing with these scopes, here's one that's a little bit handier for demonstration since it's not attached to a barrel. Zeiss objective, 3 to 12, or I'm sorry, 3 to 10 power, 44 millimeter objective. And not only do you have to be cognizant of how steep the pitch is on whatever scope it is you're buying, and I believe you told me it was a Calls or Callies, I can never say it. It's a European scope, 34 millimeter tube, and I'm not sure of what that pitch angle is, if it's steeper or shallower than, say, what I have set up here. But something else you need to be aware of, different scopes from different manufacturers, even scopes from the same manufacturers with different power settings, will have a different eye relief. And what may work, it may work mathematically all here, even if you get on some of those websites and you put in the size of your tube and the height of your rings, and you calculate you know, the objective and the diameter of the bore, and you put it all in, and it all fits. It doesn't fit your eye. The eye relief is wrong, because what can happen is where your eye needs to sit for different makes of scopes can change. You see how, like, I'm moving it backwards and forwards? Well, especially if you have to move the scope back, the first place, if you're trying to go as low as you can, you're going to collide is going to be right there at the front of your base. So even though you get everything to fit mechanically, you get behind that gun and you can't see shit. Now, some of you are going to be like, well, how do I tell eye relief? I don't know all the answers to this. I would just tell you what I have always done. So the first thing I need to do is I need to check the eye relief to get a basic idea of what the eye relief is on a scope. The eye relief on any scope I've ever had, I'm not going to say this is true for everything, but it seems true to me. The eye relief on, this is at 3 power. Let's just, for argument's sake, let's say the eye relief is this distance. When I crank this up to max power to 10 power, typically on most optics, the eye relief will get shorter. So when you're behind your rifle or you're setting up the eye relief, always make sure that you turn the power on your variable optics to max. I don't care what it is, because that's the worst case scenario. If it's a 25 power optic, you need to set that scope up for the 25 power eye relief And so not only are you dealing with individual makes and individual eye reliefs and different glass and construction, I believe your individual vision will play a part in some of this. So the first thing you can do is I crank the scope to max, take a flashlight, shine it through the objective, and then as you can see there on the table, let's see if I can show here. So what I do is I try to form the smallest point where I'm focusing in the light. And that basically gives me the eye relief, the shortest eye relief for this scope. And this is something you can check in any store or gun show or anywhere you want. Once you start to figure out a good eye relief for you, what works and what you need, you can pick up any scope and you can use this as a reference to be like, is this going to work for me, or is this going to be way, 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 way off? So now you have that set up. The best thing to do, my experience is, because no matter what I look up on the internet and I put in all the calculations and everything, it's always a little bit off. So what I like to do is I'll take two half sections of rings, and I'll just mount them into the base. So hypothetically, that's mounted into the base, and then I'll get behind the rifle cranked, and I'll move it back and forth and try to figure out what the eye relief I need on max power for this rifle. And then at that point, I will look and see if I'm clearing, can I get enough eye relief, or do I need to bring it in tighter, or do I have enough? Maybe I have a lot of extra room and I want to go down lower with the rings, which is actually what I had happen. This is a big honking scope, and the eye relief was pretty generous on this Steiner, and I was able to really dial that in to get real tight clearance right there. So let me go ahead and just to prove a point. There's a sheet of paper folded in half, and it actually, on the fold where it's a little bit thicker, it actually catches a little bit. That's how tight that is. So before you pay attention to what's here, you need to figure out what works in your eye box, what works in your brain, and what works back here. And then you can figure out whether you want to, have this crazy high clearance, or whether you want to try to keep it as low and as tight as you possibly want to make it. Now, some of you are going to be obsessed with making it as low as possible. And I have been there. I know what you're talking about. And if given a choice, if I wanted to, if I have to choose between making something as low as possible and decreasing the barrel offset, the optic and barrel offset, I mean, I try to keep it as small as I can. However, it's not the end of the world. This is what caliber is this? This is my 223, and this is a pretty desirable scope. This scope is worth a fair amount of money. This is a Schmidt & Bender, as I previously said, 3-12. This is a copy, an actual off-the-line copy of the United States Marine Corps PM2 sniper scope. So it's not like, well, it's not real glass, it's not a real gun, I wouldn't really do it this way. No. This is perfectly acceptable. So look at how this is set up. So you'll see the scope is above the base. I mean, I'm not even trying to drop that as low as possible. As a matter of fact, these are nothing fancy. These are just Badger rings. I don't remember if those are steel or not, but those actually were just by chance. Those are a type of ring that currently is used by, if you're into that kind of thing, certain units or whatever. They're nothing high speed, and they're nothing fancy like all the cool kids do, like say these Seekin rings. But the Badger rings get it done. And I am not suffering at all, either for position shooting and holdovers, or for accuracy, working the turrets and working my way up and working my way down, in the power range and shooting this on the range. So if you can't achieve this greatness here, don't kill yourself. Don't freak out. I mean, what you'll end up having happen is, my example is, let's say you have a couple extra sets of rings and you're putting the scope in the rings and moving them back and forth, and a lot of you are watching this thinking, well, hell, that's more money. Who's got extra sets of rings that would, you know, work with that? Well, if you're trying to uber dial this stuff in super, super tight, you're going to end up making some mistakes, and you're going to end up with extra sets of rings, which is how we have it here in the Armory. So, you know, you might get lucky, you might get it tight, and I'm sure there's guys out there better than me that can just, they take all the right measurements and put it in on some of those websites. They get it all right in and it lands perfect the first time. I've never successfully done that. I've always been off. I've either been too low and had to reorder, which was the last set of rings I bought, and then, but typically I will go conservative and try to work my way down, and then as I'm mounting more optics later on, I might even have rings that I can, you know, work them in the projects and do it like that. So G, hopefully this maybe sets you straight on what I was talking about when talking about the scopes and talking about, you know, the sizes of the scopes. Obviously objective is important. This area up front here is normally the #1 place you're going to collide if you're trying to get as low and as far back as you can. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think on this factory base here, I'll try to zoom in on it, you can see Blaser even actually cut the corner at the, you know, when they manufacture that, they cut the corner off of that to give just a few more millimeters of clearance, because that's the first place you run into issues. And then, you know, your eye relief and, you know, being comfortable behind the rifle. And the eye relief, let me go ahead and say this. When you're behind one of these guns and you're set up for precision shooting, don't force the eye relief. Think about, you know, you can look it up, you get some training, you know, natural point of aim, closing your eye, behind the optic, giving it some time, open your eyes back up, and is the reticle still in the same spot? Or you have any shadowing, or do you have any parallax issues? Because that will show itself later if you're not 100% comfortable behind this piece of glass. So don't focus so much on this and beating this base. This is where you live and die, back here. Get this to work first. Then maybe if you want to try to, you know, dial it in and be uber cool, do it there. Anyway, if you want to see pictures or some up-close images of this for G, go to our website, john1911.com. That's john1911.com. It's all about shooting guns and having fun. Everybody, have a good day. I do love this gun.